Hi, this is Brian Duffy, Castonia Tractor. Today we're going to have a quick overview of creating boundaries. In this case, we're using this John Deere Gator. The first things we had to do, we got a machine-specific kit that has the harnessing, the mounts, and the brackets to mount our RTK StarFire 6000 receiver. We've got a 2630 mounted inside the cab that we'll be interfacing with here as we get started drawing the movies. The other thing up front we've got, due to the need for more accurate boundaries, we have mounted a small pole with a chain to hang down so that it's a visual reference and we can more accurately follow the actual edge of the field to create a very accurate boundary.
Okay.
We're inside the Gator now, getting ready to set up the 2630 for the documentation of our boundary. So we go off our main menu, go into GS3, and the first thing we go to is equipment. So just like you set up your tractors, combines, sprayers for auto track, we go in, and in this case we've selected a utility vehicle as a type with the arm sticking out that we showed you a few minutes ago. To get it in front of the machine and not in the rear, my connection type I've set up as a front rigid 3-point. Then I've gone into my offsets and did the measurements to the unsteered axle, and then from the height of the receiver off the ground. Then under my implement, I'm just simply calling it a boom. My current offset in there is 72 inches or 6 foot, so I've just said I've got a 12-foot boom, and that'll build the picture that as we're driving, that's what we're going to see taking place. And then again, my actual measurements in here under my change offsets for this particular vehicle. So that's how we've set up the machine and our implement. Now, to do a boundary, you see I've just selected button A or mapping, and I go into the boundaries tab. You'll see we have a boundary from our last field evident here in showing up. And if we look down here, it doesn't, even though we've got the UTV vehicle selected, it does use a tractor, but you can see our tool on the front. Now, several things are here important. You see this brown arrow. I always refer to the brown arrow when we're drawing that I'm holding a pencil at the edge of the field as I drive to create our boundary or our interior boundaries. This can move, and in this case, because we have an implement, we can go to the front. Then this might be the tractor if the implement's on the back, and it'll be off of the receiver or the back corner of the implement. But again, our measurements are crucial so that we have accurate placement of our pencil as we back into corners and so forth that way to get those square. This button toggles around, but if you think of the boom that you saw a minute ago, we're off of the left front. Some common mistakes that are made here when guys are getting started is anytime we change client farm or field, this reverts back up to here. So I'm going to show you, I go in here, I'm going to have new, and I'm just going to call this field test. When we come back, it's up here. This is a very common mistake. Guys do their first field, go to the second field and start recording and realize it might not be placed where you want it to be. So that's a common thing, and unfortunately when we start doing a boundary, if we make a mistake, the only option is start over. So hopefully if these mistakes, you find them before you leave the field, but that can happen too. The next thing we want to point out, even though we had our measurements for our boom width on this application, the boundary offset right here is we're taking it's 6 foot, and when this is correct, off of the left front. Finally, before we start moving, I'll point out these 2 buttons down here. This button is the start, and it's also a pause. This button is for when you're finished, and it stores and completes the process of creating the boundary. Now I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about the pause button. Being aware of some of the advantages of using the pause, one of the first things are when we drive into a corner. We drive into the corner, get even with the angle or to the right side edge, and we stop or pause. We can back up, go away from that corner a ways and get lined up with the edge of our field. And when we start recording again, it will snap a line between where we paused it and where we started recording again. So we don't have to worry about getting lined up perfect and straddling our previous line and getting to the right place as we start. It will fill it in. The other big advantage that it gives us is if we maybe got a tree down along a fence row, we can pause it, drive out around the tree, get lined back up, start recording, and it snaps through just like we drove it. And finally, a very common thing for us anyway is we've got a lot of fields side by side. We've got a post out by the road that is the boundary line, and back in the middle of nowhere is another post. And maybe because of tillage or similar crops, it would be very difficult to drive a straight line between those 2 posts to draw our boundary. We can drive up to the post in the road, pause our recording. We can drive back to the post back in the middle of things and start recording. It'll snap a straight line, and we've got a very accurate boundary to work from. We're now lined up with the edge of our field, ready to start recording our boundary. And a little tip I learned years ago was that I start on a flat side, typically in the middle of a field, not in the corner. There's an auto-complete feature that will show you at the end of our recording that I let complete the boundary the last couple hundred feet, and it makes it very straight and very smooth. So at this point, I'm ready to start driving. I'm going to hit our record button. I'm going to start moving, and you're going to see a purple line start to appear on the left side of our gator. I'm moving along, avoiding obstacles. This could be trees in a fence row, ditch drains, various things like this. Coming into my first corner. This one I'm just sweeping. So I sweep this. Now the interesting thing you see is that we are dragging a second line back to our origination point. You're going to see that we drag that line as we go around the perimeter of our field, and it always takes us back. Now this is kind of that auto-complete feature when I'm done. Now I'm coming up to make a square corner. I've stopped. I hit pause. I'm simply backing up, and I'm going 60-80 feet up from the corner and getting square with the edge of my next edge of the field. You'll see up here that the green circle is where we are. This was where we discontinued up there at the point our recording, and now when I hit to resume, see it jump? That's kind of that auto-complete feature, but that's what I was talking about. It really speeds up our corner and makes it much smoother and more accurate. So now we're going, and you'll see some small wobbles and weaves here as the edge of our field is not perfectly straight, but I'm using the chain to stay right at the edge of the dirt and the grass on the side. My third corner I'm entering here, I'm sweeping as well. see, we're stretched, but we started our recording up here. Now I hit our complete. It does ask us, we're going to stop recording. Are we sure we want to end? If I hit that button by mistake and I really wanted to continue recording, I could hit cancel and go back and continue on. But since we are done, I'm going to hit this and accept. And there you see our completed, and it put a straight line from our starting point to where I'm setting right now. Next, we're going to transition and get positioned and show you an interior boundary for waterways and maybe trees and rock piles and even drains and so forth in the fields. Okay, now we're positioned and you see that we're setting inside the field. So this is going to be an imaginary island or a waterway where we want to record. You see our big field down here to the left. Our exterior boundary currently, I got 4.53 acres. A total of 1,728 feet is what our purple line is. I have up here, I've transitioned in the drop-down box from exterior to interior boundary. We can have multiples, so if we got multiple waterways or drain pipes or islands out here that we have to farm around, we can have these. It wants us or makes us name it, because we can come back in Operations Center or Apex and edit these somewhat too. So it's important to know what they are or what they stand for. In my case, I'm just going to hit new. I'm going to call it number 1, accept, and there it is. Now the next thing we deal with here, is it a passable interior boundary or not? I will show you how that looks after we complete this, because I can toggle and make one that I record as passable, not passable, by removing the check mark even here on the display. We can also change that in Operations Center and Apex. So I'm ready to go now. I use the same button. I start recording, and as I move, you'll see I've got a passable boundary. It's drawing a yellow line instead of the purplish line that we've got that would indicate a non-passable boundary. We're dragging the line just the same way we did around the outer perimeter. Simply driving around an imaginary island here. You can see the auto close, and we're coming back down here now. And this is good enough for what I want. I stop our recording, and there is our boundary. It has taken the distance off of our interior boundary now, off of our total, so it gives us a very accurate tillable acres for this field. This is very handy, as you've, I'm sure, all seen certain counters that will count backwards. If we've got a boundary, it'll take the total acres, and as we plant, spray, harvest, whatever, it will back the covered acres out of there. And it's a handy tool in many cases to keep an eye on how far we got yet to go to the end. And this is also now with the new features in the Operations mobile app, where we can look at this vehicle as we work, and with the Gen 4 displays and the JD Link wireless data transfer option, where it's updating in almost real time. That counter or the countdown is visible on each machine as you go to view that in the My Operations mobile app.
3, 2, 1.
And last but not least, I promised to show you the difference. If I take the check mark out of here, you'll notice that this interior boundary turns the same color as the outside. And you might ask, why does it make a difference? Well, a passable, or the yellow, and you think the automation, and which goes all the way back to the iTech Pro, the turn automation, and now the totally autonomous vehicles that are coming out later this year, If this is a waterway that's shallow enough and we say it's passable, our machines would come up to there, raise the planter, drive through, put it back, and continue on to the other end. However, if we've got it not passable, it will make a turn and go back the other way and then keep making turns until it can bypass that. So that's the difference of why it's important to mark it as a passable or a not passable interior boundary.